Today's video, I will show you how we tiled the kitchen wall of our campervan conversion. You can follow our journey with Athena Camper on Instagram at athena.camper. This is the first time I tiled anything and I found it relatively straightforward, more so than I thought I would, with the right research and preparation, so I thought I would share a tutorial with you on how I did it. I found these tiles and tops tiles just after we'd come up with the concept of the van, and in utter fear that they wouldn't be available by the time I needed them, I calculated how many we thought we would need and bought them about a year prior to them going on the wall. You will need your chosen tile, Sikaflex 512 caravan sealant, an applicator gun, 1mm space tile spaces, grout, a small bucket, sponge and grout float, a tile cutter, silicone, a tape measure / ruler, and a pencil. We started by scoring the wall to give it a better grip. When you tile in a standard way in a bathroom, you use a tile adhesive which you place the tile into. We felt that because this dries hard, it would cause problems long term and may cause tiles to pop off the wall. Instead, we chose to use our old reliable Sikaflex. For each tile along the edge, I used the applicator gun and did an E shape in Sikaflex. The full horizontal line of the E sat along where the tile finishing strip sits to give it extra grip on the wall. Start with the first line of tiles and place them from the bottom up. Place 2 spacers down on the worktop and place your first tile on top. This means that every bottom tile you place is also spaced in the same way and won't allow them to be in uneven rows as well. You will use the spacers in between each tile to separate and hold the tile in place, and as you place the tile on the wall, push hard to allow for a good bond. Make sure to push the wall in from all angles to make sure that they lie flat against each other. Once you finish the first line, measure to the top tile and trim your finishing strip to the correct size. Cut the inside part off at a 90-degree angle to allow for the second one to butt up against it, but not overlap and push the tile forward. When I moved on to the second line of tiles, I just did 3 horizontal lines on each tile instead of the E, as I didn't need the additional part to hold down the finishing strip as well. Continue building from the bottom up, inserting the tile spaces as you go. Both allow for the air to escape. As the spaces weren't being held by a tile adhesive as they would do normally, I found it useful to put the point that was going against the wall into some Sikaflex before pushing it in between the tiles to hold it in place. The best tip I have if you're going for a random pattern is to map out where the tiles are going to go before you put them on the wall. Random is really hard to achieve, and please don't think that you're going to do this as you go along. The tile box we had lots of repeats for one pattern, which was annoying, so that was the one I kept a close eye on, but even so there's one part that still annoys me despite planning it out. We have about 10 tiles left over by the time we'd finished. As you continue to place the tiles, make sure that all of the corners sit flush with each other, otherwise this will make grouting harder later. With the spaces, I used 4 for each tile I placed, 2 to separate it from the tile below, and 2 to the left to separate it from the tile to the side. These remain in place until the Sikaflex dries. You'll notice that I've left off the top line of tiles as we realised we hadn't enough finishing a strip to do along the top, so left the top line to allow us to slide it in later. My fault, I'd shut the strip in a car door and squished it, so we had to go and buy a second one. When I finished one wall of whole tiles, I moved on to the second wall and started from the other edge. This time, as I knew the height I needed for the finishing strip, I laid this on first and placed the tiles over it instead of how I did it with the first row. Go back to putting an E shape on the back of the tile for the first row to give it better grip and holding the finishing strip in place. Continue the same way until you get to your last row of tiles. You then want to cut the 2 finishing strips for the top of the tiles. Here I managed to clog up the nozzle, which meant that the Sikaflex then poured out the back of the gun, which wasn't ideal. Then my camera cut out, which meant I missed filming a whole top row, including putting on the 2 finishing strips, but just imagine that you watched that happen. Then came the fiddly bit. Our basic tile cutter wasn't quite up to the job with these small tiles. I decided to cut the left-hand wall to size and then put them in first as they were on the curve, but it was much easier to cut them straight. I then tiled the right-hand wall up to them, as these were going to be straight edges on a straight finish and would therefore tuck the left-hand edges behind and create a neater finish than doing it the other way round. I cut them roughly with the tile cutter and then measured and remeasured and handed the smaller bits over to Jack to then cut them with an angle grinder, which allowed for more precision. Our tile cutter was just cracking them and we didn't have enough leftovers to allow for practice with the tile cutter, and this part got very tense. If you've never used a tile cutter before, you measure and mark up your tile with a pencil and then place the line you want to cut along the line of the middle of the tile cutter. You then push the handle down and score with the blade along the line you want to cut. Bring up the handle so that the flat part pushes each side of the tile evenly and it pops the tile in two along the line you've just scored. I'd left the Sikaflex to dry for 24 hours to make sure it had fully cured before I then grouted. I mixed up the grout as per the instructions in a small bucket. I did this in sections, cleaning the bucket out each time. Once you've mixed it up, then scoop out part of it onto the grout float and keeping the float fairly flat, squish the grout in between each of the tiles by moving the float in big sweeps. Don't be afraid to get this on the tiles as well. It does move around easily while it's not dry. I also found it stuck in parts of the pattern of the tile, but again, this is easy to clean off afterwards. Once all the joints between the tiles are grouted, allow approximately 30 minutes, or for however long the instructions on the grout says, for the grout to be touch dry. As we had 2 separate walls that the tiles were sitting on, we felt comfortable with the grout on each wall individually. However, the grout in between the two would have much more vibration than the rest, so we ran a clear strip of mastic down on top of the grout to give it a clean finish. We also did this between the bottom row of tiles and the worktop. Using a dampened sponge, not wet, clean the surface to the grout lines. Rinse out the sponge frequently with clean water and don't apply too much pressure on the grout lines, and don't wash over them too much or you will remove too much grout. Repeat this step several times until the tiles are clean. Once I'd finished, there were some small areas with gaps where I'd applied too much pressure, so I mixed up a little extra grout and repeated the process until I was happy with the finish. I'm so pleased with the finish, and it adds so much character to Athena, our van. We nearly talked ourselves out of tiles, and I'm so glad we didn't. I hope you found my tutorial useful, and make sure you like and subscribe for more videos.